Welcome back to Track Talk. Tonight I'm excited to bring a game of 1870 to the channel, one we haven't done before, so that's always nice to expand the offerings on the channel. And before we jump into the game, I just want to make a note that I found a way to anonymize the players in the game. So I've gone through, this is a real game that was played on 18xx.games, but I've went through and changed the player names so that they are not linked to the video in any way. Whether or not I will do this moving forward, I guess remains to be seen. And if anybody feels strongly about it, please leave me a comment. But I do feel like it's probably in the best interest of the channel to not have player names on display. In the past, there's been one or two complaints about it and some hurt feelings, so this may be a safer way of moving forward. With that said, let's hop into the auction. Matt, of course, as noted, this is not the player's actual name, will be leading us off, and he's going to bid on the Katy. John following that up with a bid on Southern Cattle. Tom joining on the Katy, so now contested auction, and Eric going for the bridge. Matt, second go around, and he goes on Gulf Shipping. So no real synergy between Gulf Shipping and the Katy. We'll see if he actually wants to end up with the Katy or if he's just kind of jumping ship now that it has another bid. John, he pulls here, and that gives Eric the bridge for basically face. John gets the Great River and Cattle. Not the most exciting combo, I wouldn't say. But potentially he will be going early in priority. We'll see who wants to pick up the Frisco. Probably Tom will. So I don't know that John is going to go early enough in priority to snipe the Katy and use the cattle on that or anything like that. And then finally, Matt ends up with the shipping company. Tom, I assume he's just going to take the Frisco here. He does. Pars it for 100 as expected. And then we have a contested auction between Tom and Matt. So the only reason that Tom may have considered not taking the Frisco there is because now he's a little bit in a rough spot in terms of price enforcing for the Katy. Matt, again, with the shipping company and the Katy, I don't know that he's that eager to end up with the Katy, but let's see how this plays out. Goes up to 190 already, 200 for Tom, 205. So getting to a fair value, I would say, for the Katy, maybe even a little bit high. And Tom wins it. So he ends up in an interesting situation, winning the two most expensive privates with the Frisco and the Katy share. The Frisco, of course, only needs 20% to float, so he's not going to be presidentless, or I guess not operating in the first operating round. There are players that could, in theory, try to steal the Frisco. I don't know if that's really to their benefit to do that, though. They may just allow Tom to have that. And then the question becomes who gets the Katy. Eric, he has the bridge, and he picks Cotton, actually. That's interesting. Cotton starting kind of in the middle of the map in Memphis. Would be, I don't know, when I'm playing, I prefer probably the Mopac. Get some nice early game runs, and then start a second company to work your way across the map. But starting Cotton, Matt, he has shipping, and let's see which company he goes. He takes the GMO, so nice synergy there, operating down south. John, he has the blocker and then cattle. So it looks like he actually will probably end up with Katy here. He does. Pars that for 90. And then Tom is left with the Frisco and some cash for another share if he wants it. Let's see what he picks. Just passing for now, and it looks like everybody else is going to be just floating. We'll see if Tom actually just sits on his cash. And it looks like he has, and unfortunately that's not quite enough to give him priority into the next stock round. But he will be operating at least fairly early, or having fairly early in the stock round, I should say. He is up on the Frisco. We'll see if he wants to head up to Kansas City or if he has something else in store for us. Looks like he is instead heading down south, probably anticipating that Cotton will be buying in the river. I think that's a safe bet. And we'll see if he heads to Memphis or Little Rock. The Katy did float, so he probably feels safe in assuming that he'll be able to get a run north in the next operating round and doesn't want to lay track for the Katy and make it too easy for that president. I imagine that's why he's heading south. The question will be, does he feel comfortable buying two trains here? He's going to be able to secure himself a single run for sure, but no guarantees that he has runs for two trains. So may not want to accelerate the train rust and open up the threes too early for the players later in operating order. He buys a single two train, and we're on to the Katy. Kansas City does lay a track that could potentially be helpful for the Frisco, and then lays Topeka, the Santa Fe's home tile. He buys, looks like just a single two train as well. He's much more likely, I would say, than the Frisco to have two runs, so maybe a little bit surprised he doesn't go for a second two train there. GMO, he's laying his home tile and then heading up towards Jackson, maybe looking to early float the Ick. When I'm playing the GMO with the shipping company in the port, I oftentimes try to just run hot out of Mobile into the southeast offboard. I don't, I guess I can't recommend it though. I don't oftentimes have success. So, but it is fun to have some high early revenue with that. Buys two trains, does have pretty much a guaranteed second run for himself. And final company is Cotton. Buys in the bridge as expected, lays his home, and then heads right over to Little Rock. So the Frisco is blocked out of Little Rock for the time being until green, but does have a guaranteed run into Memphis or Kansas City. And Cotton buys two trains. Where is his second run coming from? I suppose he's anticipating heading into Springfield. Okay, fair enough. So 1-2 train left, and we are into the stock round. John has priority, but really no cash. Tom buying a GMO. GMO with the port does run pretty darn well. And GMO is operating late enough in operating order that there's a very good chance that it has access to green. So good revenue in that company. He may go back for a second share even. Cotton president, he buys a GMO as well. Matt, out of money. Tom, he is buying cotton actually. Does have two trains, so okay, fair enough. And not exposing himself to a dump potential. And everyone else, actually, Eric is selling out. And I think this is the first stock sale of the game. So I'll just take a second to note that in 1870, there's this unique mechanism called price protection, where if someone sells your company and you have the cash, you have the opportunity to buy that share and prevent the stock value from dropping. You can also even buy above the certificate limit, or the presidency limit, I guess I should say, with that, which is a very fun interaction and a unique feature to this game. Well, maybe not unique, but not many games feature this. And we will see how that plays out throughout the game. Eric has sold the GMO. President is Matt, who does not have enough cash to price protect. So even though I've talked about the mechanic, we will not see that manifest just yet, but I imagine we'll be seeing it soon. GMO price drops as usual, and GMO is actually redeeming that share. So that's another feature of this game. The companies can buy shares in the stock round. So the price does drop, but the GMO now has a treasury share that will pay into its treasury. Eric is passing. That did count as a stock action for Matt, so he has lost priority and will be going last. And we're into the next operating round. The Frisco is up, and we'll see if he wants to head to Kansas City or down into Memphis. Looks like he chooses the Cotton home tile, running just a single two train for 40. And does he bind other threes here? He does, and I think we should have anticipated that because he is the Katy president, or the Katy private owner, and that's the highest value private in the game. So that should have been pretty transparent to most of these players. He buys a second three, okay, and leaves himself enough money to buy in his private and still have some token money. We're on to the Katy itself, now into green. Well, the single two train may see him just upgrade Kansas City here, buying in his privates, and he lays some track for himself. Interestingly, doesn't link up with Springfield, actually lays the DIT instead. We'll have a three train shortly, so can take advantage of that. Um, he assigns the cattle company for a few extra bucks on Kansas City and pays out for 50. Going to be picking up at least 1-3 train and stays at just 1-3. Cotton's up, and with green upgrades Memphis, giving him access down south to the IC home tile in Jackson and also the port in Mobile. Runs 2-2 trains for 100, pays that out and buys the 3. He actually buys 2 3s, so going to be running a ton of trains in the next operating round if given the opportunity. But seeing as how he's operating late in operating order already, and players are buying in the privates, I imagine these 2 trains are going to be rusting pretty early. GMO heading towards Jackson, running 2-2 trains, able to double tap his port for an extra $40, and he is paying it out. He buys a 3, just a single 3, and we are on to the 4s. So first company that floats, I imagine, will be rusting these 2s. We'll see how that works out. The Frisco technically is operating at 100, so unless someone tanks these shares before they float, looking at Tom probably, well, so Tom's the president, so we may not see that. The Frisco's trains should be running. John is leading us, and he buys a Frisco, so let's see if he is aware of this and trying to counteract those 2s. Tom, he buys the Santa Fe, so right next to the Katy, he has Kansas City kind of sandwiched between his 2 companies now, and just going to be floating that company, it looks like. Eric, not a whole lot of cash, and buying another Katy. Matt, he is buying the Cotton, a bunch of trains in that company, but again, don't imagine we'll see those 2s run. John, he buys a Cotton, so is he just going to let the Frisco run its 2 trains? We'll see. Tom, he is, and I don't think that Tom could price protect to prevent the Frisco from dropping. He wouldn't be able to float if he did. So probably John could have sold there if he wanted. We'll see if he still has the opportunity to do it, so maybe he will. Looks like Tom is taking a detour from floating the Santa Fe and instead investing in Cotton. Eric is passing out of cash. Matt, still a bunch of cash for him. And he buys the Katy, almost floating up there. John, he's passing Tom, going back for the Santa Fe. Eric passing Matt. He is also passing, so all these players are just waiting for this to float, and we'll see if they have anything up their sleeves in terms of manipulating operating order after the Santa Fe is passed or floated. Santa Fe, Tom doesn't have enough cash to do it. He's going to have to sell a share. And what does he want to do? He sells a Katy, and the president of the Katy, John, does not have the cash to price protect, so that falls down. And Matt, he buys the cheaper Katy, so that's why he was waiting. He does lose priority for this, and we pass into the operating round. So that's twice that he's valued shares or a stock action over priority. Tom, Frisco does look like he's going to be running his trains, and with a token in Memphis, he could run, looks like 3 trains. Yes. He could also link Memphis up with Jackson, though, to run all 4 and drop a token there. So maybe we'll see that. Looks like it. And he's going to run just 3 of his trains. For some reason, I thought he was going to be able to run 4. I guess he doesn't have 2 runs out of Springfield, and that's why. But he does get himself a 3 run out of Memphis, so that's pretty good, and he's able to hit the port. So long story short, running for 180, which he pays. And Katy, he links up to Springfield. Surprised we didn't see that last time, and he's also building through that dit still. Running 2 trains for 110, which he pays, and we see that 4 train come out. So the Frisco's only company to run its 2 trains. That's not true. The Katy ran its 2 trains as well. And the Cotton and GMO are just out of luck. Cotton running 2-3 trains, still going to have nice runs for himself. And he's making a beeline west towards Fort Worth, probably wants to destinate as soon as possible. Running 2-3 trains for 150, pays that. GMO is up, probably sad that he's not able to double tap his port anymore. Upgrades his home, runs for 100 and actually withholds. We'll see where he is. If he's getting close to the green, he is, or yellow, I should say. So we may be seeing some yellow strategies in this game. And the newly floated company, the Santa Fe, is up, upgrading to Pica, and buys a 4. So rapidly running through these 4 trains. He actually buys a train across from the Frisco as well. And the Frisco will now have 328, so enough for a 4 train. Maybe looking to pick up a second 4 train for his 2 companies. Frisco looking to bypass Jackson, it looks like. He is trying to get down into the southeast for a destination run eventually. And with a double A into Mobile and a 4 train, will have that destination run. So will be pretty early for him if he wants it. He runs his 3 for 90, which he pays, does pick up the 4, so may see him destinate in 4.1, which would be pretty good for him. Don't think anybody's going to beat him to that. Katie continuing to head down west, does eventually want to link up with the offboard there, but really kind of slow progress. And he's hitting a bunch of cities on the way. Going to need a long train to destinate with all this. Running for 140, which he pays. Cotton still with 2-3 trains, and I imagine heading towards Fort Worth. Does. He's paying for 160. GMO now with 2 trains, still able to double tap his port, and gets 2 runs into the offboard as well. Running for 190, pretty good. Pays that out. So I think we saw a withhold last time, is that correct? But he's paying out this time. Does need some cash for the upcoming stock round. Santa Fe, first run for this company, 2 trains, and potentially has some decent runs with an upgrade in Kansas City, which he does. Does he snag that token? Doesn't really need to. Cotton is his only competitor right now for tokens in Kansas City, but Cotton only has 2 tokens and has already used them. So may want to leave Kansas City open for his Frisco to run through as well. Looks like he passes for now, runs 2 trains, 140, pretty good. And we are into the stock round. So just taking a look at the game state, Tom, the Santa Fe and Frisco president, has the most shares and the most net worth right now. He also has the most liquidity entering the stock round, so may be able to maintain his stock lead. John, Katie president, is kind of neck and neck with the other 3 players in terms of shares and net worth. And Eric Cotton needs to be a little bit careful, has no treasury shares to rebuild his company cash, has 2-3 trains, and the route of this company is just not amazing. So not loving his game position. And then Matt, unfortunately, they sped through yellow and right into the 4 trains, so he didn't get a huge opportunity to take advantage of his port. Probably hoping for the game to slow down a little bit, and be able to continue double tapping his port with 2 trains. His portfolio looks okay. Some shares in the Katie, which almost always is pretty good, and the GMO has some decent track already. So we'll go back to John, who's leading us off. He's selling the Frisco, and we'll see if Tom wants to price protect here. John will also sell the Katie, so it looks like he's going to be floating something. And with the Katie as his sole presidency, he may be looking down in the southwest for a friend, either the Fort Worth or the Texas Pacific, in order to get some track along this west side of the map. Let's see what he does. Sold out of everything, and he sells out of the cotton last, so probably hoping that he can get some quick stock actions by skipping Tom if someone price protects. Does par the Fort Worth, and Tom doesn't protect the Frisco. John doesn't protect the Katie. Eric does protect the cotton, so Tom has been skipped in priority or in operating order. And Matt is up now. He buys the cheaper Frisco And we're back to John. Oh, sorry, Matt is selling the Frisco. So let's see if Tom wants to price protect this time. He's also selling the Katie, and that's going to put it out of reach for price protection. John is floating a new company. I don't think he has the liquidity to price protect. He's also sold, so wouldn't be able to. Matt looks like he's going to be floating as well. Tom is not price protecting again. John can't price protect, and Eric does protect the cotton again, so he's up to 8 shares there. Matt, what is he floating now with the GMO? Does he look towards the IC? Does have a friend right next door if he does. Could also look at the MOPAC, but it's going to take a while for the GMO and the MOPAC to get some track synergy. So he takes the IC, okay. And we're back to John finally, who is continuing to float the Fort Worth. Tom, some actions for him. He's been pretty much skipped this stock round so far, unfortunately. And he will buy his Frisco from the market. Eric, he buys a GMO, does have good trains and decent runs, so makes sense. Matt, he is continuing to float, and so is John. Tom, last share for him probably, and he buys his Frisco. Matt continuing to float, so we may just see these two players float in order here. Matt, both companies have floated, and will we just pass into the operating round? Looks like Matt, so his company, the GMO, is actually buying a share from his presidency, gives him a little bit of cash that he can now use in the stock round. And John is also taking a stock action in the Katie to redeem a share from the market. So both companies have treasury shares that are growing, always valuable. What does Matt do with his newfound cash? He buys the GMO. Interesting. So he redeemed a share from himself and then bought an IPO share. Okay. The IPO pays into the company, but he does, I guess, protect his company from being trashed more. So he's basically exchanging a insecure IPO share for a secure treasury share. All right. This does cost him priority again, and he's actually not done yet. He sells an IC. The IC is his newly floated company. I think it was already operating behind the Fort Worth, so he's not changing operating order here. He just wants more cash, and he is going to buy the Santa Fe, it looks like. All right, 2 trains, good runs. Fair enough. You see that a lot in 30 too, where you have a 60% float and you sell down 1 share to buy a paying share. We're into the operating round, and the Frisco is up. Frisco looking to destinate, it looks like. Interestingly, actually laying a curve instead of heading into Mobile. So will not be getting its destination run right now, which is interesting. I wonder what he's doing there. And he tokens in Topeka. So he has double tokens in Topeka and controls a lot of the westward axis of the Katy. This is real bad news for the Katy too. He was hoping to head down to the southwest, and now all that track he's laid to Wichita is kind of worthless to him. So pretty bad. It also hurts his run. Frisco running for 200, it looks like. And pays that out. Does have a healthy treasury, so rebuilding his train money a little bit. Cotton's up. Heads into Fort Worth and has reached his destination. With a 3 train, he'll be able to get his destination run first. So I was expecting the Frisco to do it, but it looks like Cotton has beat him to it. Pays out, and he is going to take the token on Fort Worth, double the worth of that city. Right now it's only 20, but it eventually will get up to, what is it, 50? I believe it's 50 in brown. No, it looks like it'll just be, oh, well, with this style, it will be 50. So we'll be doubling that for the rest of the game. And paying for 180. Very good for him. Fort Worth, first operation. He is heading up towards Kansas City, maybe? Not entirely sure. Maybe just doesn't want to pay any terrain track to get over to Denver, so it's going to take a little bit of a longer route. Buys the 4. We are sitting against the 5s, and the Katie is up. Where is he headed? So he upgrades Springfield. Probably needs to secure that token or else he's in deep trouble. Does, and runs for 170. Pays that out. So maybe the Fort Worth company was laying this track to threaten to get into Springfield and token out Katy. That would be pretty bad. Actually, they're the same president. So John is running both those companies. I don't think that's what's going on. Maybe the Fort Worth is just working towards Denver. Ick, first operation, and he is heading up towards Chicago, his destination. He's going to buy the first 5, and we're into Brown. Private companies have closed, but the tokens don't close, so the port and the cattle until 6s come out. GMO running 2 trains now. Does have the brown tile and the brown offboard now, thanks to the ick. And he actually upgrades the track that was laid by the Frisco earlier. So Frisco will be destinating here. And GMO runs for 210, it looks like, which he does pay. We see the destination run of the Frisco. And the Frisco puts his token there to double the Southwest. So foregoing a extra token on the map in order for some better runs. Runs for 280, pretty good. And we're into the last company, Santa Fe. He is laying track for 2 runs into Kansas City. And is he able to take advantage of it already? Looks like he does. A nice run of 180, which he pays. Into the next operating round in this set, with the Frisco leading us off, and he's got good track. Doesn't really have to worry about his runs too much with the tokens he's already secured. He upgrades out of Topeka, so potentially worried about a token in Kansas City blocking his runs and looking to bypass that. He also makes it hard for Kansas City to head southwest now with this track. There are valid upgrades that will get him there, but it's not ideal. And Kansas City will eventually upgrade to 3 holes, so I guess he doesn't have to be super worried about being tokened out there, but giving himself options. Santa Fe running for 280, again, a full treasury pretty much, so inching his way towards a 5 train of his own if he wants it. Cotton, he upgrades Fort Worth, his destination, going to be improving his runs, running for 210 this time. Katy, he is seeing that the track is not developing in his favor and starting to get some track pointing west. Runs for 200, which he pays. GMO, 2 trains, and he is inching his way up towards St. Louis, it looks like. His 2 companies are both heading in that direction. The IC also wants to get to Chicago, so all this track is very synergistic for him. Runs for 210, pays it. Fort Worth, he is slowly heading up to Denver, so that track that we were wondering about before is doing exactly what we thought. Running for just 50, pretty poor, but will be getting better. And then the Santa Fe, he links up and not quite at his destination yet, but does want that token at Fort Worth, I imagine, and will be securing his destination run very shortly. So it does snag the token, and also getting a little bit of a track into Denver for later in the game. He runs for 180, and he's actually withholding. Did he withhold in the last round and I missed it? No, this is his first withhold. And on the market, he is at his par value. So could be seeing this company run in yellow later in the game. Ick, as expected, heading up towards Chicago, laying some expensive track. Runs a 5 train for just 120, which he pays. And we're into the stock round. So looking at the player positions, Tom ahead in net worth, ahead in shares still, just like last time. Has 2 good companies, Santa Fe and the Frisco, with good runs. Frisco is already destinated, Santa Fe not far behind, probably in the next operating round. So pretty strong position for him. He's pretty closely followed by Eric, but Eric has the cotton with no permanent train money and just 2 3 trains. We are going to probably see the 6s come out very shortly. I imagine it'll be in the next set of operating rounds, so might be in trouble there, and only has 1 presidency. He's operating, he has pretty late position in the stock round, so not going to have his first choice of company. And in terms of companies available to him, the TP, Texas Pacific, reasonably synergistic with the Cotton now that that track has been laid. Probably the Mopac is the best company left. I don't imagine he wants the Southern Pacific, but I also can't imagine he's going to be given the Mopac with 2 people moving before him. And then finally we have Matt with the GMO and IC, getting in there in terms of track, but does have some train liability coming up for the GMO, and not a lot of cash in either company, so not in a great position. John's leading us off, and he buys the Frisco. And he's selling the Fort Worth, which is his own company, so not doing any shenanigans trying to manipulate the stock round order, just selling for cash, it looks like. Tom does take the Mopac, as expected. Pretty nice for the president of the Santa Fe and the Frisco, and an open Kansas City to get the Mopac. He's got companies on all 3 sides of Kansas City, and it is open for all of them to run to. So that's really nice for him. Eric is floating the Texas Pacific, so the one we identified. Probably sad to have missed out on the Mopac, but what are you going to do? And Matt, he is buying the Frisco as well. So Tom may have to defend this presidency, but with 2 players buying these shares, a 4-share presidency is actually probably secure. John buying the IC. Okay. Tom, is he just going to continue to float his Mopac, or is he going to trash some shares first? Looks like he goes back and buys his Frisco, gets a $40 IPO arbitrage there. Does put himself out of contention for floating the Mopac for now, but could always sell or redeem a share from himself. Eric, he is buying the Frisco as well. Matt, buying Frisco, might be floating up. And John, he goes back for a Santa Fe. Tom, he buys the last Frisco. And we'll see if anybody wants to sell down to trash this now. Eric is floating the TP, so just slowly working on that. He will have cash to float that still. Matt, he buys a Katie. John out of cash. Tom, he is redeeming a share from himself on the Santa Fe to give himself cash to float the Mopac. And it looks like John also redeemed a share on the Katie, so still has actions even though he's not having cash in his personal treasury. Eric, he buys the TMP. Matt, he is passing. John's also passing. Tom, he is redeeming a share into the Frisco. Okay, getting secure treasury shares, and now has the cash to float his Mopac unassisted. Eric buying the TMP, almost floated there. Matt passing, John passing Tom. He is buying his Mopac now, and the TMP is floated. He sells 1 share, not too worried about his operating position and just wants paying shares. Looks like Tom continuing to float. Eric, he goes back for the Santa Fe. And Tom is 1 share away from floating. Looks like everybody else, actually Matt is now selling a Katie, and he's selling a couple of different shares actually, so Santa Fe as well. Looks like they are not price protecting, and he has floated the final company in the game, the Southern Pacific. Doesn't have the cash to float it, maybe just reserving this presidency, realizing that it's looking like Eric would otherwise end up with priority and potentially would be able to float the Southern Pacific ahead of him. Tom now floated on the Mopac, and does everybody just pass here? Tom has still got some shenanigans left, selling a Mopac and buying the Katie, which will leave Eric with priority. We're into the next operating round, and the Frisco is up. Frisco upgrading the track previously laid by Katie, and this does give him 2 runs out of Kansas City, potentially, one into Springfield, and then one once this track is upgraded to the west. He's developing a pretty nice little circuit for himself with his 3 companies. We'll see how the Mopac works out for him. Running for 280, and he pays that. Cotton's up. Upgrading Fort Worth. Both of his companies are able to hit that track, I believe. And he is destinating there, so every upgrade is equally or doubly efficient for him. Running for 250, which he pays. GMO down south is going to be destinating, it looks like. Has to pay the track cost for the MP, which was just floated by Tom. So that's a little inefficient, but probably worth it still to get the double run. And looks like he's now running for 190, which he's paying. First operation of the Mopac, he's saying thank you to his friends down south in the GMO, and he immediately upgrades his home. Probably going to be heading west towards Kansas City, if I had to guess. Eventually wants to get west into Dallas, so it's nice that he has track for himself in Kansas City. And now that I am looking at it a little bit more closely, maybe that's what Tom was looking for with this upgrade, allowing the Mopac to run into Kansas City and then west. Katie's up, upgrades Kansas City, running 2 trains for 240, which he pays. The IC heads into Chicago, is able to destinate now, and running just a 5 train for 140. He did snag a token in St. Louis. Unfortunately for him, that's his only other token, and that means that nobody else is going to be able to get into Kansas City. So I think that Tom's strategy here of securing tokens all around Kansas City is going to pay out for him. He is shuffling a train out of the GMO, giving the GMO, I believe, 5 train money. It does. And not quite enough for a 6 train, though. IC is placing its token again to double Chicago, and now has a better run of 210, which he's withholding. So shuffle the train and then also withheld, probably looking at things and realizing that he has a non-paying share in the Southern Pacific, and this train rush may be about to kick off, and he has no permanent trains. Fort Worth, 4 train. He is heading up towards Denver and secures a token in Oklahoma City, only other token for him. Running for 100, which he pays. First operation of the TMP. Running out of Dallas, gets a second connection into Fort Worth, which is really pretty underwhelming now that he's been tokened out. He needs to get over to New Orleans. It's going to take him a while. And he's already tokened out at Memphis, so he's going to have to head down south to get there. Buys a train out of Cotton, shuffles some money into his leading company, and will be picking up a permanent train, or at least a 5 train, in the Cotton, it looks like. Santa Fe is up, and this company has been hovering. We were wondering if he was going to head into yellow, and it looks like he may very well. Tom, he's at a cert limit, so we will see him withhold, I'm sure, to start exceeding his cert limit. Upgrading Topeka, runs 2 trains, able to double tap Topeka and Kansas City. Very nice run, 240, and he's withholding as expected. Frisco's up, and he's upgrading down south, looking to bypass the tokens in Mobile, it looks like, and still hit his destination. So secure run for him, just running the 1 train for 170, which he pays. Not buying another train. Are we at a poison 5 right now? There are 2 5s left. Looks like Cotton's going to be picking up one of them, though. Cotton upgrades Little Rock and pays out 160. Does buy the 5 train. GMO upgrading St. Louis and running his 4 train. And that will be, I think, enough for him to hit his destination and the offboard. Looks like he's got to run up 180. and he is not buying the 5, so we may see a stall here. Katie upgrading into Little Rock, so has some options now, and getting into Fort Worth, making his way southwest eventually. Fort Worth, he is heading up towards Denver still. Going to take him one more operating round to get there, runs for 130 and pays out. Nobody looks like they're buying this 5 train. So may have to wait for that Southern Pacific company to come out before we see that last 5 bought. Mopac, is he going to start heading east? Looks like he's heading to Chicago. I said east, but I meant west towards Kansas City. So he does head east into Chicago and running for 290. Nice run. Tom seems like he's in a very strong position right now. The IC is up now with 2 trains, and he's able to double tap Chicago and St. Louis. Pretty nice revenue for him, 390 it looks like. And he is actually withholding that. Did he withhold last time on the IC? He did. So he's running scared right now. He needs to survive the train rush. It's going to be hard for him to buy paying shares. He has this SP that he continues to need to float, and he's only got $400 cash. So those withholds are hurting him into the stock round. 2 companies left, Eric, TMP, upgrading Dallas, and Halfpang. The Santa Fe, he links up with Denver and still doesn't have a run to the southwest. Is he going to start upgrading out of Fort Worth? He does, but interestingly, he's heading east out of Fort Worth instead of down here to southwest. Not really sure about that. Runs for 270, and he withholds again to stay yellow. Last operating round in the set. Frisco upgrading Memphis, running just a 4 train for 180. Is he able to destinate with just a 4 train? Yes. Okay. Cotton now with 2 trains, and he's able to take advantage of those for 360 it looks like, which he pays. GMO, he upgrades Jackson. Does have a token. Don't imagine he wants to lay it in Jackson though. And running for 210, which he pays. Katie. So let's look at this track for a second. Looks like he's just looking to bypass a token in Fort Worth. May see him drop his last token in Dallas. We'll see if he does. He does. So he's just inching his way southwest. And has secured himself a reasonable run. Are there any tokens that he needs to be worried about in Little Rock? I don't think so. So the Santa Fe potentially, GMO potentially. We'll see how that works. Running for 290 for now. Fort Worth finally linking up with Denver. Does have a destination run for himself. And runs for 160. Now destinating, double run. And runs for 110. So he actually did not put his token on Denver. So the Fort Worth company has an extra token now. And that could spell bad news for the Katy. Well, I keep doing this. It's the same president. So he wants that token somewhere, but it's not going to be to cut the Katy's run. Mopac, is he heading west finally? He is, but he's heading west down south. That's interesting. We'll get to Dallas this way, his destination, of course, but I'm still surprised that he's not heading over to Kansas City. He still has such a nice track for himself. Could token in Jackson. Looks like he does to secure himself that route. Runs for 330, which he pays. Ick. He's going to be the one heading west, and he has no tokens, so at least it's track that will benefit Tom down the road, and his Kansas City runs are safe for now. TP is up, and he is heading down south. Actually, he upgrades Dallas, and just running his 3 trains still. He's half paying again, so inching his way towards a safer train. 5 train not being permanent, but probably is anticipating having to buy a 6 down the road. The Santa Fe has been withheld into yellow as expected, has a very large treasury now, and he is upgrading to bypass Little Rock now that he's been tokened out, probably. Running for a 300, and he withholds it again. So $1,200 in that company, and it's all the way in green. Eric is up, and he is not quite at cert limit. Because of these yellow and green companies, nobody's at cert limit. He is actually leading in terms of net worth, although I will say I do not think he's actually ahead of Tom in the game right now. Tom has had to withhold, I think, 3 times on one of his companies, which he's a 50% president of. Meanwhile, Eric has withheld on the TP, I think just once. Let's see. He withheld twice. So both players withholding, but I like Tom's map position a whole lot more. Eric is up and buys the Santa Fe. Matt buys the Santa Fe as well. And why is everybody buying the Santa Fe? It is green shares, fair enough, and has 2 trains, so we'll be running well. Good track and has a very healthy treasury, so yeah, makes sense to buy that. Good company to invest in. John, he is buying the Trans-Pacific or Texas Pacific of all companies. That one makes a little bit less sense to me. The track for that company is a lot worse. It is a yellow company, but I think I'd rather have the IC than the TP. Tom, he buys the Fort Worth, probably just looking for some arbitrage there. May not be holding onto those shares. Eric, he is buying the IC, so that's the company I'd want if I was choosing between the IC and the TP. Matt, also buying the IC. John, he is having his Katie redeem a share, so almost has a full treasury. Can only have 4 shares in there. And Tom buys the IC. So 1 share left there. We'll see if Eric picks it up. He does. That company will be floating up. Bad news for Matt. Matt going back for the other yellow shares. So I think there's just going to be a run on these yellow and green shares. John, he's still bucking the trend here, not buying any of these free cert limit shares. Tom going back for those. I imagine Eric and Matt will buy the last 2. Looks like they do. John, the Renegade, he's going for the Mopac. Tom may also want to pick up a Mopac, usually a pretty good company. He does. Eric, he buys the Fort Worth. I guess at this point shares are becoming a little bit limited, so you got to pick what you can get. Surprised that nobody's been forcing this Southern Pacific float just to push trains. I imagine that it's in someone's interest to do that. Who would be in the position wanting the 6 train to come out? So Tom is the one that I've been kind of favoring in this game so far. He has 2 3 trains. John, he has 1 3 train. Matt has 1 3 train, and Eric have 2 3 trains. So both Tom and Eric have 2 3 trains, and Eric in particular probably doesn't want that 6 train to come out because he doesn't have another train for his second company if it does. Doesn't that mean if you're Tom, you kind of want that to happen since Eric is your closest competitor? That's what I think, at least. Eric is buying the Fort Worth. Matt, he buys the Mopac. That company will probably float up soon. John, his Fort Worth is redeeming a share. Okay. And Tom is now, okay, so he's seeing what we're talking about. He's going for the Southern Pacific. Buys a share, and he's selling a Katie, and that's John's company. So this is interesting. So he is selling a company, a share in a company of the player just ahead of him in stock order. So if John price protects here, Tom will have another stock action back to back, which is what happens. So Tom now buys another Southern Pacific, and he is threatening the presidency. Can he sell another share? So he wants to sell a share in John's company. John is Fort Worth and the Katy, and look at that. Tom has a share in the Fort Worth. So I think we're going to see that, and Tom will steal the presidency. John price protects, and Tom is now the presidency of the Southern Pacific. Southern Pacific is not going to be that great of a company, but hey, in a game where share density is becoming so important, you'll take that presidency cert any day. Tom has stolen the presidency. We're on to Eric. Um, Eric buys at Fort Worth. That was just sold by Tom. And we're on to Matt, who's just had his lunch money stolen. He sells a TMP, so that's an Eric company, and he has now floated the SP. So he's going to do the same thing back. So he may be all actually hanging on to this presidency if Eric price protects. He does. So Matt has another action. He sells another TMP and buys the Southern Pacific. So now he's the president. He's stolen it back, and we'll see if he gets yet another stock action because he only has what, 4 shares? Um, he does. So in theory, if he doesn't do this, he could leave himself vulnerable to Tom stealing this presidency right back. But it looks like Eric is playing nice, does price protect, and Matt will be able to buy his 5th share. So Tom had a nice gambit there, but wasn't able to take it to completion. John buying the Southern Pacific. Tom, he's selling out of the Southern Pacific, just said, I'm over this company. If I can't be president, I want nothing to do with it. And Matt can't price protect, so pretty bad news for him. Tom, does he buy anything? Uh, Looks like not for now. Eric is buying the Mopac. Matt kind of out. John passing. Tom also passing, sitting on a ton of cash, not able to meet his cert limit even. And Eric says he's lost priority. He's just going to buy as many shares as he can. And his ability to buy shares is going to be a little bit limited. Most of these shares are protected. The only thing that's available is the Southern Pacific at this point. They won't pay one time, but then they will start paying for the next 2 sets in the operating round, or operating rounds in the set. So maybe worth picking those up, at least one of them, which is what he does. And he now has 29 shares to Tom's 21. So even though I like Tom's position in this game, he is a little bit worried, I think, if you look at the share density in Eric. I mean, 8 shares is certainly nothing to sneeze at. Now all the shares have basically been bought, and we may just see everybody pass. So Matt has priority, and we are into the Frisco. Let's look at the bank here. So $4,800 left, and 10 companies are now operating. In the late game, you can usually expect the average revenue to be just north of 300, maybe even 350 on average. So $3,500 per operating round is very reasonable. If that holds true, we could see the bank break, but those numbers are really more for when the permanent trains have all been distributed. So I imagine we're safe here. We probably will see the game extended for at least another operating set, potentially 2, depending on if 12s come out. Frisco, he is looking to link up down to the southwest and completes that. So does that give anyone their destination? I don't remember who's destinated and who hasn't. We'll have to look at that. I think Mopac eventually wants to head down there. Um, so maybe he's looking at that run through Kansas City for the Mopac. Runs for 180, pays it out. Cotton, he is heading down towards New Orleans potentially. GMO, just a 4 train, and he completes the link up with Kansas City. Does he get a token there? He does. So that's kind of bad news for Tom. This will open up shortly in gray if we do see, we will see gray. So that token's probably not super valuable. But if there can be a third token dropped by someone, that could be bad news for Tom. GMO runs for 200 and pays it out. Katie, he is, where is he heading? Finally down to the southwest. He keeps getting tokened out. Katie's had a bad time in this game. So I think just working his way down southwest. Runs for 310, pays it out. Fort Worth is up, and he links up with the southwest. Runs for 160, pays that out. Mopac, he is looking to eventually head down to Dallas. Going to take him a while to get there. Hasn't been able to lay very synergistic track for this Mopac. Runs for 330 and pays it out. First operation in the Southern Pacific. And he wants to get over to New Orleans, but is not going to just make a beeline there. Instead, heading up towards Dallas potentially. Running, buying a 5 train doesn't have a run as its first operation, but we are looking at 6s now. And the IC says, I have a very healthy treasury and I can buy 2 of these 6s right off the bat, which I think is what we're going to see happen. So he upgrades Springfield. No tokens for him. He withholds yet again. I think he's just eager to stay yellow. Doesn't need the cash, certainly. And rusts the 3s. Okay. We see the cattle and port tokens gone, and he buys that second 6 train. So we are off to the races. He has rusted the 3s, put the TMP in a rust position, and there's only 1 6 left. So Eric is fortunate that he was able to operate right after the IC here. Otherwise, he'd be looking at a much more expensive train in a company that really doesn't have that good of routes. So he buys that last 6, and the Santa Fe has the money for the next rank if he wants it, and really cash to spare. So these 4s may be not long for the world either. That said, he does have a 4 in the Frisco he may not want to rust. So if he were to like half pay on the Frisco, he may be able to get the run of the 4 train and deny it to everyone else. Looking at John's position, he looks very tenuous. So he has 2 4 trains. We're about to see those rust, and there's really no guarantee that he picks up an 8. He is operating after the GMO, whose 4 train is going to be rusting. So let's say the Santa Fe picks up an 8 here, Frisco, GMO, and then John is out of luck, has to buy 2 10s. He has $600 in the Fort Worth, so he's not going to go bankrupt, but he's going to have to sell shares. He's in trouble. We'll see if Tom wants to rust his own 4s or not. He upgrades Kansas City. That's what we're talking about. That token from the GMO ends up being very underwhelming. And Santa Fe actually has a token that he hasn't laid yet either. Runs for 170, withholds to stay under his cert limit. And does he bring out the 8? He does. So bad news for the Frisco, his other company, but really bad news for John, I think. I don't know. Does it make more sense for Tom to wait and bring out the 8 on his 4? I guess he would have to half pay, so he's only losing out on half of a run, so to speak. But he does fall back. Yeah. I'm going to have to think about that in a little more detail. So now that we are into gray and Kansas City has upgraded, looks like the Mopac can destinate, and the Santa Fe also is destinating right now. Running an 8 train for 280, so maybe that's why he bought the train, so that he could get this run. And Mopac is placing his token on the map. Did the Santa Fe also do that? Yes, so they're both taking the bonus. And we are into 6.2. Frisco trainless, but has nearly enough cash for that 8. So he upgrades St. Louis and buys the 8. Cotton, just a 5 train. Runs for 240, which he pays. GMO, expect we'll be seeing the 8 here. Could buy one of his other trains across, but the way the trains are going, I imagine we're going to be seeing the 12 come out, so he may just want to buy that 8. I don't think he would have to sell shares to do it, and we have one more stock round, or one more operating round, so he will still have cash into the stock round. We'll see if he does it. He does buy the 8. So John on the Katy and Fort Worth is looking at 2 10 trains. That is brutal. I think he's eliminated. Katy, he upgrades Houston, or lays Houston, I should say, and then links up with the Southwest. He's selling shares as expected and buys the 10 train, See who price protects. Probably everyone wants to price protect if they have the cash to do it. Matt is able to, and everyone price protects. Makes sense. Save yourself a stock action. John with the Katie also destinating, and Fort Worth trainless also is going to be buying a 10 train. So he has to sell additional shares and put in his presidency cash. Has secured his train liability, has 2 permanent trains for his 2 companies, but boy, is he trailing now. Almost 1/3 of the value of the leading players. Mopac, he is, what did he do here? He's laying down south. Not entirely sure where he's hoping to head. Maybe just developing track here for himself. Running for 250, pays that out. And the Southern Pacific now, upgrading Houston. Imagine he wants to get over to New Orleans pretty soon here. 2 non-permanent trains, has thrown away a token in Houston, but needs to be a little bit careful that he doesn't get tokened out. That said, we're at a stage in the game where I really don't think there's enough tokens for him to have to really worry about that. Fort Worth has one, and Santa Fe has one, but I don't know that it's worth it to either of those players to put tokens for the sole purpose of hurting this Southern Pacific. I don't think Matt's in contention for the win here. Running 2 5 trains for 250. The IC 2 6 trains should have a pretty nice run here, and it looks like he's running all over the board through Kansas City. So running for 600, that's monstrous. TMP, he is eventually heading over towards the east, getting pretty close there. And he must have done something funny where he bought a train across. Or was he one of the players with a 4 train? I think he might have bought a train into the cotton because the cotton had a 3 and a 5 before. So he wants a better train for himself, but he is going to have to emergency buy it, it looks like. And he brings out the 12. Okay. So let's just see here. Eric probably realizing that if the 12 doesn't come out, Tom would just win this game when the bank breaks. So going to force Tom to also buy a 12 and hopefully extend the game by doing this. He is leading by 5 shares in terms of share density, so wants to go late. The question is, does the TMP have a 12 run? I mean, it almost certainly does not. But I guess rusting your opponent's trains are a reward in of itself. This does give the other players an opportunity to price protect now that he had to sell shares. So Tom is inching closer in terms of share density, now only 4 shares behind. I think he was 8 or 9 shares behind at the start of the operating round. And Santa Fe is up. We'll have to buy 12 train or shuffle trains. Does he have trains to shuffle? No. So he's on the hook for a 12 train. Won't have to sell shares to do it though, so he's fine. Upgrading in Austin, it looks like, down south. And he was going to withhold, or he has been withholding at least, to stay yellow, so he's probably not too upset about falling back. Last operating round of the set, and I think everyone has all the trains that they are required to buy. That's not true. Sopak needs one. So we'll see where he looks for that. Cotton, first to operate. He is heading down to New Orleans and has a single 6 train, which has a decent run, running southeast to southwest, and pays out for 260. Frisco, he's upgrading Wichita and running for 340 with his 8. GMO, also an 8 train, probably running along the east side would be my guess. Instead, running east to west up north, is able to hit both St. Louis and Kansas City, so that's pretty nice. Pays out for 320. Mopac, probably a similar run. And actually he's heading down east, able to hit his destination. So just choosing to head towards the southeast for that extra offboard. Runs for 360. Katie has a couple of shares in the treasury, but those are going to be less important now that he has a 10 train. Only a 50% presidency for John. That's rough. I think this is the player that had to out of pocket those 2 trains last OR, so he's in a bad position. He is upgrading down south, running for 320, which he pays. Fort Worth, running for 270, pays that. Sopak must have shuffled a train out of here. He had a train last operating round. And he buys a 6 train out of the IC. Has to buy it against operating order, which is painful. IC has shuffled enough money for a 12 train of his own, which he buys. And the T&P running his 12 train. The map has actually remained open enough for him to have pretty good runs. So half paying, and the final operating set or operating company in this operating set running the Santa Fe. Imagine that we may see some continued withholds here. Don't know when the bank's going to break, and wants to exceed his cert limit. So he does withhold 430. Has a really nice run for himself. So let's just look at this here. Market is at 8,000, so probably will break in the next set. And if you're expecting it to break in the next set, why withhold there? Does he have more than he doesn't have more than 60%? So he lost a payout that he probably doesn't need. Is he hoping to bring out another 12 train in one of those companies? Don't know that he needs to. The only player running 2 permanent trains in a company is Matt, who really is not going to be catching up to him. 3 shares behind and $2,500 behind. I don't think you're worried about him. Closest competitor is Eric. Eric has 4 shares on you and will continue to have 4 shares on you. There's not really any way for you to make up your share deficit other than these SOPAC shares. So yeah, I don't know about withholding there. I think maybe a pay is in order. Regardless, Matt is up, and I think we'll just see players buying up the sole remaining shares here. Should be a pretty quick stock round. Matt is passing actually, so why doesn't? Oh, so he's at max shares on the S&P. That's rough. John buys the SP, and I think the other 2 players will just buy them as well. And we're into the next operating round. So I believe this will be the last operating set. And just looking at the game here, we've been favoring Tom for a while. He is $500 ahead of Eric. Eric is 4 shares ahead of him. The other 2 players, I think that we can safely count them out. Tom has the Frisco, which has had nice runs all game. Frisco running from southeast all the way up into Kansas City, and then I guess back over to Denver potentially. So good run in the Frisco, probably going to have about this revenue for the rest of the game. Mopac has good runs too. He's able to run through St. Louis and Kansas City, and then down into Dallas in the offboard, so he's secure. Santa Fe, as long as he continues to pay out or starts to pay out, the Santa Fe has had good runs too, all along the western side of the board and into Kansas City and St. Louis. So all of Tom's companies have good runs and should be competitive. Eric, his closest competitor, is sitting on just a 6 train in the Cotton. Cotton does have decent runs, able to run into St. Louis and then down into the Southwest. But with just a 6 train, going to be hard for his revenue to compete with these 8s and 12s. And then the T&P with the 12 train, I need to make sure I'm looking at the right tokens here. The IC tokens look pretty similar. So his run is okay, because he can get down into the Southwest and then up into Kansas City and St. Louis. So his train will be okay, but I think that probably most of Tom's companies are running better than the Cotton. So even this 4 share lead that Eric has may not be enough to be an equalizer. I think if the bank breaks here, Tom should be able to take this. So with that said, do we just, let's go through this operating round, and then if it's a clear call, we'll just jump to the end. So Cotton, he is laying into Springfield and running for 280. Okay. Frisco, he is just upgrading Dits, running for 350. So already we see Tom's company running for quite a bit more than Eric's. He pays that out. GMO, Tom and Eric both have one share in this company, so its revenue is going to be split evenly. It is running for a monstrous 580. MP, or Mopac, he is not sure where he's headed. Just completing a loop around Kansas City, but there's no token in Kansas City for him to worry about, really. So running for 380, which he pays. Katie, bypassing some dits potentially. Just picking up some extra cities for a 10 train, running for 430, pays that out. Fort Worth, maybe also hoping to pick up some dits here. The Southern Pacific does have a token. Tokened out everywhere worthwhile, though, so I don't know that this is going to be a game changer. Running his Sticks train for Pidlin 130, pays that out. Eric is invested more than Tom here, so that is a net gain for Eric, but with such a low revenue, I don't know if that's going to be too important. Texas Pacific, so this is Eric's best company. He is upgrading New Orleans and does not have any tokens, runs for just 380 and pays that. He gets a destination run for himself, and so does the Southern Pacific, so they both finally made it to New Orleans. Double run for the Texas Pacific, and we're back to the Southern Pacific, who is doubling his run. Both of them decided to lay the token and double their run, of course. And we're on to the IC. 12 train for the IC. Should have good routes. Runs for 430. And the Santa Fe. So Santa Fe is running all over the map from Chicago down to the southwest, corner to corner. 490, very good run. And he's withholding. So why withhold? The market has $4,000 in it. And he is running for $400 less than Eric, his closest competitor. But if he had paid out there, that $400 would be a whole lot less. And he's $500 ahead, or he was $500 ahead. I don't think he can extend the game even by buying another train. So this is perplexing. I think if he pays out last operating round and this operating round, he would easily win this game. As it stands, he's actually going to lose right now with the revenue from Eric. And Eric is running for so much, I think it's just based on his stock value. So he has 8 shares in the cotton, and the cotton is accumulating $25 of value each run. So even though its revenue is underwhelming, the stock appreciation is pretty strong, and he's actually going to time it perfectly. He's going to hit the 400 in this last run. So yeah, I think that Tom wins this game if he pays out, but he unfortunately is not. So it looks like Eric will win. All right. I'm going to skip into the next operating round, and we'll just see what happens here. So the Santa Fe did not run at all. He bought a train against order with the Frisco, falls back on the Santa Fe, and is now $400 behind Eric, and there's $2,000 in the bank. So he has failed to extend the game, has lost a run on his permanent train, and has lost the game as a result. Yeah, I think this was a preventable loss. I think he just needs to pay out and run his companies, and he wins. That's surprising. We'll skip to the end of the game, and Eric takes it narrowly by about $300. But again, if Tom pays out instead of getting fancy with the trains and withholding, I think he wins this. Interesting. Well, I thought this was a fun game. It showcased some shenanigans with how you can manipulate order in the stock round and potentially steal presidencies if they're insecure. A lot of price protection, some redeeming of shares, and just fun to bring a new game to the channel. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll be back again in the future with more.